WeWork's been a great partner for us. I mean, we do events with them in multiple cities, and it's allowed us to expand our network and provide a space for all these entrepreneurs that come together and do these events. And I encourage everyone to come out, do the day trial. If you're doing events or interested in even doing your own events, these are great opportunities to get in the room with like-minded people as we are right now. So if I haven't met you yet, my name is Michael. I'm the CEO and founder of Entre. We're a social network for entrepreneurs. We do events across the country in 12 cities. Philly is obviously one of those cities that we're in, and we really want to help build up the startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem here. We bring together and bring you guys amazing speakers like we have today. We do founder interviews, investor interviews, panels, all sorts of stuff, and then we're getting ready to launch our app, which is kind of a cross between Twitter and a LinkedIn, but it's specifically designed for entrepreneurs, freelancers, and startups to help you find co-founders, developers, investors, all of these people much, much easier, help you share your story and what you're working on in a community that understands what you're going through. Because as we all know, if entrepreneurs go through a lot of ups and downs, we're going to dive into this a lot for sure, but we collectively, it can be lonely sometimes, and it's one of the reasons why I started Entre, to just connect with other like-minded people. And make it so that we can help each other and help build our businesses together, and really just make entrepreneurship accessible for everyone, no matter what city they're in, what kind of company they're at, and whatever stage that they're at. We want to be the place that people can come into and be the community that can support them, whether here in Philly or anywhere across the world. Entrepreneurs need to know each other to build their businesses. So without further ado, you guys are in for a treat. We have an amazing speaker, Mike Viscuso. So I really like having the speakers kind of introduce themselves and go into their background, but I mean, this guy was working for the CIA and NSA, 18 years old. He co-founded a few companies, the most recent one being Carbon Black, which has gotten acquired by VMWare for over $2 billion. So he has a lot of stories to share, a lot of ups and downs, and we'll dive into a lot. But I'd love to have you start with just going into your background so people can get a better idea of who you are and what you're all about.
So yeah, I'm Mike Viscuso. I'm actually quasi-local. So I grew up in Phoenixville and went to Villanova University. And while at Villanova, sort of finagled my way into the National Security Agency after about 7 failed polygraphs. I finally passed my 8th one. And I thought I wanted to do code breaking. I was getting my degree in mathematics and computer science, and I really thought I was going to do cryptography work for the rest of my life. And just about 4 months in, I realized that I did not want to do cryptography work. And my mentor there pointed me at the NSA hacking unit, and I fell in love. I literally fell in love with offensive side of security, breaking into computers. I was the first one to show up at the office. I was the last one to leave. And I had found the thing that I wanted to do. I did that for about 10 years for the NSA and the CIA, and got the opportunity in 2009 to be on the other side of that. So the U.S. government and a bunch of the contractors that were supporting the U.S. government were all getting hacked by the Chinese. And one of the campaigns that the Chinese led was super successful, and pretty much anybody who knew how to respond to these incidents was helping other victims. And so what they did was they took offensive guys and incident responders, which are kind of like the digital equivalent of like an ambulance. They put them together and said, okay, this is how we're going to do surge support. And so I went and got the opportunity to actually help people recover from being hacked. And when I saw the tools that were available to them, I thought to myself, like, there's just no way that incident responders are ever going to be able to respond to any sort of real hack from anybody like my team. And so a bunch of the people asked me like, well, okay, well, what kind of tools do you think we need? And whiteboarded for a few months and then set out on building Carbon Black. So Carbon Black's journey was, as Michael alluded to, not a straight line. It was far from it. We actually merged with another company in 2014, a much larger company called Bit9 in Boston, which took me from the DC area up to Boston for about 5 years. And despite the fact that Bit9 was much larger than Carbon Black, 2 years after the transaction, we renamed the entire company Carbon Black. So the smaller entity actually took over the bigger one. And 2 years after that, we went public, and a year and a half after that, we were purchased by VMware. I moved back to the area about 2 years ago, so I'm back in the area after being away for 15 years. I've realized that all of my friends that I used to hang out with, like I have zero in common with them now. So I'm pretty much friendless in Bluebell right now. But I get to hang out with my wife and my 14-month-old daughter. We picked Bluebell because it was equidistant between my family, who still lives in the same house I grew up in, and my wife's family, who still lives in the house that she grew up in. And we've really been enjoying being back in the area, and it's a great opportunity for me. I was speaking with Paul earlier, saying that no matter how many experiences you have, you're always learning. So despite the fact that you may think you're going to learn from me tonight, I actually think I'm going to be learning from you, so no pressure. But this is an opportunity for me to network as well. My last day at Carbon Black was January 31st, so I am 20-some days removed from the baby that I helped to create, and really trying to figure out what I'm going to do now.
Welcome back.
Yes. No, it's an amazing story, and I think a big part of that is like you went through a lot of changing cities and going through a lot of changes with your business. Jumping back to the beginning, why did you start it? Like, why did you want to become an entrepreneur? Why did you found this company? What was it? Just because you saw all these problems that were happening in the space of cybersecurity, and you were like, I need to fix this because this is a big issue, and I know there's a lot of people that need this problem solved, or why was it that you wanted to really take on this task? Because it's a big, I mean, even now more than ever, it's a huge issue, right? I mean, we're getting ready to launch an app. We're trying to figure out, we have to get cyber insurance, like all these things, like, there's a lot of things that go into it. So what made you, I guess, start it? Like, why?
Well, first of all, I was too naive to realize how hard it was. So looking back, I'm not so sure that now, knowing what I know now, if I would have done it again, it was really, really hard. So first of all, it was just kind of ignorance. It's tough to even say it out loud, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So, but ultimately, I mean, you see this problem, you feel like you have a solution, you just get obsessed. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. You can't sleep because you're thinking about it. Everything you're doing, everyone you're talking to, you can't help but talk about it. That's kind of when you know, like, all right, I either have to fulfill on this, or I need to just stop thinking about it. When you can't stop thinking about it, well, then I guess you only have one choice. You mentioned that I had started other companies before, so I think I kind of had that entrepreneurial thing. And some of you have felt it, some of you are feeling it, but you just sort of have this entrepreneurial bug. And for me, it was just, my mom would tell you that the only way to get me to do anything is tell me I can't. And so when you see that like 90% of startups fail, you're like, yeah, but I won't. Like you just sort of like want to prove everybody wrong. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was attracted to offensive security, because everyone was basically saying, hey, here's a computer system I bet you can't break in. And then you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to break in now because you told me I can. And it was the same thing with starting a company. It's just most people say it can't be done, and so that's sort of my kryptonite, unfortunately. Is that when someone tells me I can't do it, then I'm sort of committed already to doing it.
Yeah. I think a few things there that I want to dive in on too is the obsession thing, because I feel the same thing, right? I'm absolutely obsessed with this, and I saw it was a big issue for me. Like, I had no idea what I was doing when I was starting out, and I didn't know anybody. So I'm like, where are all the entrepreneurs at? I want to connect with them. And I saw the common thread between it, but I'm signing up for this for the next 20 years. Like, there's nothing that I enjoy doing more than talking with other entrepreneurs. So I know, like, I see the lining of, I'm absolutely obsessed with this, and I see that common thread in a lot of other founders, successful founders, and people that I see as well. But you can also go down like a slippery slope with that too, and get obsessed with something that you might not really, it might not be working, but you just keep, hitting your head against the wall. So were there times when you were starting out that you maybe had to pivot, change directions a little bit, and go down a different route? Kind of understanding the same underlying solution, but doing it in a different way, that you knew that you had to kind of go down this other route, to be successful and keep up with your obsession in a way.
Yeah, I mean, look, the plan was not to merge with another company in Boston. That's pretty clear. And there's a lot of reasons why that was the right decision for the company. There's a lot of reasons why it was the right decision for me personally. I was struggling under the role of CEO. I was really having a hard time. I was learning as fast as I possibly could, but the learning curve is steep. And the learning curve on HR, and the learning curve on product, and then the learning curve on go-to-market, the learning curve on finance. I mean, there's a lot of learning curves that you have as a CEO, and I certainly didn't surround myself around people that were all that empathetic. These are all my good friends, and they were basically just like, hey, shut up and do it. And it was pretty clear. We got 2 term sheets for our second round of funding, and both of them said, hey, look, we're going to remove you as CEO. And that was one of those things where you're like, man, all right, you got to swallow that pill. And so you sort of know that you're no longer going to be the CEO of this thing. And so the biggest thing for me was, okay, I've got 2 term sheets, both of which are removing me as CEO. And then I've got this guy in Boston who wants to acquire the company. I'm picking a new CEO regardless, and I'm picking a funding source regardless. So the question is just, which of these CEOs and which of these funding sources are the things that most align with me and my ideals and what I want? And it became really obvious that Patrick Morley, who is the CEO of Bit9, was the most quality guy of all the CEOs. And I made it a condition for the merger that, one, we would call it a merger and not an acquisition, despite the fact that pretty much every documentation says it's an acquisition. 2, that we would do a fundraise at the time of the acquisition. So I didn't want any jeopardy that I was going to pick the right CEO, but we were going to die financially. And 3, in a cold assessment of my team's capabilities and his, it was very clear that they were really good at the go-to-market side, which is what we needed, and we were really good at the engineering and security side, which is what they needed. And so you looked at it and you just basically said, hey, like, given the options in front of me, luckily it was obvious. Now, it wasn't so obvious to my teammates, by the way, so I had a lot of convincing to do in that regard, but it was obvious. And the Bit9 Carbon Black merger in the security space is viewed as one of the most successful acquisitions / mergers that the industry has seen. And I think a lot of it is because Patrick and I were so different, that there started to be diversity. He had built a great go-to-market operations and had belittled the engineering team. And I had built a great engineering team and belittled go-to-market. And so when you put 2 empathetic leaders together who trust each other, you start to actually see diversity on the exec team, you start to see diversity in the company, you start to see that there's a little bit more balance, and that the Achilles heels that each of us had start to get a little bit masked. And I think, one of the things that, I made hundreds of mistakes before I even got here today. today. I made hundreds of mistakes, but I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was just not having nearly enough diversity on my team. I hired a lot of people who thought like me, who acted like me, which made the design phase of our company super easy. We barely had to talk with one another about critical design decisions or first principles because we already kind of knew implicitly what they were going to be. But I can't say that they were the right ones. And so, of all the teams I've been on, whether executive teams or product teams or go-to-market teams, I have found hand over fist nearly 100% of the time that the most diverse teams I've been on have always been the most successful. And there's no